Story begins with the protagonist, a man named Ethan, who has just moved into an old Victorian-style house in a small, quiet town. The house, though beautiful and full of character, carries an air of neglect, with ivy creeping up its stone walls and windows that seem to have been left uncleaned for years. From the moment Ethan steps through the creaking front door, he feels a strange, oppressive presence, like the house is watching him. An unsettling sensation that he tries to dismiss as mere imagination. Ethan's move was supposed to be a fresh start. After a series of personal losses and a mental breakdown, he had hoped that the change of scenery would help him regain control of his life. But from the first night in the new house, he begins to experience a deep sense of unease. The silence within the house is heavy, almost tangible, broken only by the occasional sound of footsteps on the floor above. Footsteps that he convinces himself must be the old wooden beams settling. Yet as the days pass, the small, seemingly insignificant events start to accumulate, gnawing at his nerves. He notices shadows moving in the corners of his vision, shadows that disappear the moment he turns to look directly at them. He begins to hear faint whispers in the middle of the night. Voices so low they could easily be mistaken for the wind, but their tone carries a sinister undertone that makes his skin crawl. The whispers seem to be calling his name, drawing him closer to the darkness that lurks within the house. One evening, while unpacking an old trunk left by the previous owner in the attic, Ethan finds a dusty, weathered letter addressed to the new occupant. The letter's handwriting is old-fashioned, almost elegant, but there's something unsettling about it. The ink is smudged, as if the writer's hand had trembled while penning the words. The contents of the letter are cryptic, a warning about the house and a list of rules that Ethan must follow to remain safe. The rules are bizarre. Never leave the windows open after dark. Do not enter the basement alone. Ignore the sounds that call your name. Ethan laughs nervously, dismissing the letter as a prank or the ramblings of a superstitious former tenant. But the unease refuses to leave him. That night, as he lies in bed, the whispers grow louder, more insistent. He can no longer convince himself that it's just the wind. His heart races, and a cold sweat breaks out on his forehead as the whispers seem to close in on him, echoing his name over and over again. He bolts upright, his eyes scanning the room. But there's no one there. The silence returns, even more oppressive than before, as if the house is holding its breath. In the dead of night, Ethan begins to feel like he is not alone. The darkness in the house feels alive, pulsing with an energy that he can't explain. He gets up, trying to shake off the fear, but as he steps into the hallway, he notices something that makes his blood run cold. A faint light emanating from under the door of the basement, a place he has not yet dared to explore. The letter's warning echoes in his mind, do not enter the basement alone, but he can't stop himself from moving towards it, drawn by a force he doesn't understand. With trembling hands, he reaches for the doorknob. The metal is icy to the touch, sending a shiver down his spine. As he slowly opens the door, the light flickers and dies, plunging him into complete darkness. The silence is shattered by the sound of someone, moving in the depths of the basement. Ethan's breath catches in his throat, terror gripping him as he realizes that whatever is down there knows he's here. The presence feels malevolent, ancient, and overwhelmingly powerful, as if the very walls of the house are closing in on him, suffocating him with fear. Ethan slams the door shut and stumbles back to his room, his heart pounding in his chest. He locks the door and collapses on the bed, trying to calm his racing mind. But sleep eludes him as the darkness outside presses against the windows and the whispers return, now more distinct and mocking. The last thing he hears before finally drifting into a restless sleep is his own name, spoken in a voice that is not his own, as if the house itself is calling to him, promising that this is just the beginning of the terror that awaits. As the days turn into weeks, Ethan's sense of dread intensifies. The house, which initially seemed like a place of refuge, now feels more like a prison, its walls closing in, suffocating him with a growing unease. Each night, the whispers return, more distinct and malevolent, filling the darkness with words he can almost, but not quite, understand. They beckon him, taunt him, and leave him trembling with fear. Despite his attempts to maintain his sanity, Ethan begins to feel as if the house is trying to communicate with him, or worse, trying to break him. The small unnerving occurrences start to escalate. Ethan notices objects in the house are not where he left them. At first, it's something minor. A book moved from the coffee table to the shelf, a picture frame tilted at an odd angle. But soon, it becomes more pronounced. His keys, which he distinctly remembers placing on the kitchen counter, are found in the upstairs bathroom. The television turns on by itself in the middle of the night, flickering with static before shutting off just as suddenly. The house seems to be playing games with him, pushing his already fragile mind closer to the edge. One evening, Ethan is jolted awake by a loud crash from the living room. Heart pounding, he grabs a flashlight and cautiously makes his way downstairs. The house is eerily silent, the air thick with an unspoken threat. As he enters the living room, the beam of his flashlight falls on a shattered mirror, one that was perfectly intact when he went to bed. The shards of glass lie scattered across the floor, reflecting the dim light in a way that makes them look like the gleaming eyes of something malevolent watching him from the darkness. Among the shards, he finds something that makes his blood run cold. A crumpled piece of paper with a single word scrawled in the same old-fashioned handwriting as the letter he found in the attic. Listen. Ethan's breath catches in his throat as he realizes that the note wasn't there before. It's as if someone or something placed it there after shattering the mirror. His mind races, trying to make sense of it, but all he can think of is the basement and the warnings in the letter. The thought of going down there alone terrifies him, yet he can't shake the feeling that the house is guiding him, urging him to uncover its secrets. As the nights go on, Ethan's dreams become increasingly vivid and terrifying. He dreams of a shadowy figure standing at the foot of his bed, watching him with hollow eyes. In his dreams, the figure whispers his name over and over, his voice a low, raspy hiss that chills him to the bone. Each time he wakes up drenched in sweat, the figure's presence lingers in his mind, as if it's still there, just out of sight. The line between dream and reality begins to blur, and Ethan starts to question whether the figure is truly a product of his imagination, or if it's something much more sinister. During the day, the house's malevolence doesn't relent. Ethan finds more notes, each one more cryptic than the last. Remember, the past, it waits. The messages seem to be a part of some twisted puzzle, and he feels compelled to solve it, even though the thought terrifies him. He tries to piece together the clues, but they lead only to more questions. Who or what is leaving these messages? And what does the house want from him? One afternoon, while searching the attic for any further clues, Ethan stumbles upon an old dusty journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The journal's pages are yellowed with age, and the ink has faded, but the entries are still legible. They detail the experiences of a previous occupant, a man who lived in the house decades ago. As Ethan reads, his hands begin to tremble. The entries mirror his own experiences almost exactly. The man wrote about hearing whispers, finding strange notes, and experiencing dreams that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. The final entry, scrawled in a hurried, almost frantic hand, reads, "The house is alive. It feeds on fear. I must leave before it consumes me." Ethan's heart races as he closes the journal, his mind reeling. The realization hits him like a wave of cold terror. The house has done this before, and it's doing it again. The whispers, the dreams, the notes. It's all part of the house's plan to break him, to drive him mad. But what scares him most is the thought that the house might succeed, just as it did with the man before him. That night, as Ethan lies in bed, he hears the whispers again. This time louder, more insistent. They call his name, beckoning him to the basement. The urge to follow them is almost irresistible, but a primal fear holds him back. He knows that whatever is down there is far worse than anything he's experienced so far, but the house won't let him rest, won't let him find peace, until he confronts the darkness that waits below. The whispers grow louder, filling his mind, and Ethan realizes with a sinking dread that he has no choice. The house has won. It has drawn him into its web, and now there is no turning back. As the days slip into a fog of sleepless nights and endless dread, Ethan's grip on reality begins to fray. The once clear distinction between the world outside and the dark corridors of his mind blurs, until they are almost indistinguishable. The house, with its creaking floors and shadowed corners, becomes an extension of his inner turmoil, a living nightmare that feeds on his growing paranoia. The whispers that have haunted him for so long now seem to come from within, echoing in his thoughts, repeating phrases that make his blood run cold. "You cannot escape," they hiss. "It's already inside you." Ethan's isolation deepens as he begins to mistrust everyone around him. Friends and family who call to check on him are met with suspicion, their voices sounding distant and unreal over the phone. He becomes convinced that they are part of the house's plan, that somehow they are in on the sinister game that is unraveling his sanity. He stops answering calls, locks himself inside the house, and barricades the doors with furniture, as if that could keep out the darkness that's already taken root in his mind. The clues and messages left around the house grow more cryptic and terrifying. One morning, Ethan finds a photograph on the kitchen table, though he has no memory of taking it. The photo shows him asleep in his bed, but there is something deeply wrong with the image. The shadows in the room seem to twist and writhe, forming shapes that resemble grotesque, inhuman faces. At the edge of the bed, just outside of the camera's focus, a dark figure lurks, its features obscured, but its presence unmistakable. Ethan drops the photograph in horror, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He realizes, with a sickening certainty, that whatever has been haunting him isn't just in the house. It's been with him, watching him, even as he sleeps. Desperation drives Ethan to search the house for answers, tearing through every room, every hidden corner. But all he finds are more questions. He discovers old letters and diaries, each filled with accounts of madness and despair, written by previous occupants of the house. They speak of shadows that move on their own, voices that whisper in the dark, and a relentless feeling of being watched. Each story ends the same way, with the writer descending into madness, their final entries incoherent scribbles of terror. The house has consumed them all, and now it's coming for him. Ethan's nights are plagued by nightmares that bleed into his waking hours. In his dreams, he is trapped in the house, running through endless hallways that twist and stretch into impossible angles. The walls close in around him, their surfaces crawling with the faces of those who have come before, their eyes wide with terror, mouths frozen in silent screams. No matter how fast he runs, the dark figure is always behind him, its presence pressing down on him, suffocating him with fear. He wakes up gasping for breath, but the fear lingers, the shadows in the room seeming to move just out of sight. His mind becomes a labyrinth of fear and confusion. He starts to hear the whispers, not just at night, but during the day as well. Their insistent voices filling his head with dark thoughts. "You are losing your mind," they tell him. "You will never escape." The line between reality and delusion becomes so thin that he no longer knows if what he's experiencing is real or a figment of his unraveling mind. He begins to question everything: the house, the whispers, the dark figure. Is it all in his head, or has the house truly come alive, feeding on his fear and driving him to madness? The isolation takes a toll on Ethan's physical appearance as well. He stops eating, barely sleeps, and when he looks in the mirror, he barely recognizes the gaunt, hollow-eyed man staring back at him. Dark circles ring his eyes, his skin is pale and clammy, and his hands shake constantly. He can't remember the last time he left the house, the outside world seeming like a distant, unreachable place. The house has become his entire existence, a prison of his own making, and he is its willing captive. In his desperation, Ethan tries to reach out for help. but every attempt is thwarted by the house itself. The phone lines go dead, his messages remain unsent, and when he finally works up the courage to leave, the door refuses to open, as if the house has locked him inside. Panic sets in, and he bangs on the door, screaming for help. But the only response is the echo of his own voice and the mocking whispers that never leave him. It is in this state of despair that Ethan begins to suspect that the house's power is not confined to its walls. The real horror, he realizes, is that the house has somehow infiltrated his mind, twisting his thoughts and warping his perception of reality. He is no longer sure if the dark figure is an entity that haunts the house or a manifestation of his own deteriorating mental state. The thought terrifies him more than anything, the idea that the house is not just a place but a living, malevolent force that has taken root inside him, feeding on his fear and growing stronger with each passing day. The whispers now are constant, a never-ending stream of insidious thoughts that wear down his resolve. "You belong to us," they murmur. There is no escape. Ethan can feel himself slipping, losing the battle to keep his sanity intact. He knows that he is close to breaking, that if he doesn't find a way out soon, he will become just another lost soul trapped in the house's grip. But the house, sensing his desperation, tightens its hold, making escape seem impossible. Every door he tries is locked, every window barred, and the darkness that has plagued him since his arrival now seems to pulse with malevolent intent. As if the house itself is alive and aware of his every move, Ethan's world narrows to a single, terrifying thought. He can't trust his own mind anymore. The house has wormed its way into his very being, and he is no longer sure where he ends and it begins. The isolation, the fear, the whispers, they have all conspired to break him, to make him doubt everything, even his own existence. And as he stares into the mirror, watching as his reflection seems to twist and distort into something unrecognizable, he realizes with a sinking dread that the house has succeeded. The darkness is no longer just in the house. It is inside him, and there is no escape. Ethan's world is collapsing in on itself. The once familiar surroundings of the house have transformed into a nightmaric maze, where the walls seem to pulse with a life of their own, and the shadows harbor unspeakable horrors. The boundaries between his mind and the malevolent presence within the house are completely dissolved, leaving him trapped in a terrifying blur of reality and illusion. Every step he takes feels like he's walking deeper into a dark abyss, with no hope of escape. The house, now fully awakened to its sinister potential, begins to warp in ways that defy logic and reason. Hallways stretch into impossible lengths. Doors lead to rooms that shouldn't exist. And the layout shifts unpredictably, as if mocking Ethan's desperate attempts to find his way out. He begins to encounter rooms that seem familiar but are distorted, like twisted versions of his memories. A childhood bedroom, but the walls are covered in grotesque, writhing shapes. A living room where the furniture is arranged in a perfect replica of his old apartment, but everything is draped in shadow, and the air is thick with the smell of decay. Ethan's encounters with the dark figure intensify. No longer confined to his dreams, the figure now appears at random moments throughout the house, always just at the edge of his vision, slipping around corners or standing motionless in the darkened hallways. Its presence is suffocating, a palpable force of evil that drives Ethan to the brink of madness. He can feel its eyes on him, burning into his soul, as if it knows his every fear, his every weakness. The figure never speaks, but its silence is more terrifying than any scream. It simply watches, waiting for the moment when Ethan will finally break. The whispers have become a constant, inescapable chorus in Ethan's mind. They are no longer just a background noise. They are a part of him. A relentless stream of malevolent thoughts that he can't drown out. They taunt him with his failures, his regrets, his darkest secrets. "You deserve this," they hiss. "You brought this upon yourself." The words echo endlessly, eroding his sense of self until he can no longer distinguish his own thoughts from the whispers that plague him. Ethan's physical state deteriorates rapidly. He's lost all track of time, Days, nights, and hours blend together into a relentless nightmare. His body is gaunt, his face hollowed and ghostly, with dark circles under his eyes that are rimmed with the raw redness of sleepless nights. He's become a shadow of the man he once was, consumed by the terror that grips him. He no longer eats, unable to keep anything down as his stomach churns with anxiety and fear. Sleep offers no escape. It only plunges him deeper into the house's twisted reality, where nightmares blend seamlessly with his waking hours. One night, the house's terror reaches a crescendo. Ethan awakens to find himself lying on the floor of a room he doesn't recognize, surrounded by walls that seem to close in on him. The air is thick and suffocating, pressing down on him like a physical weight. Panic sets in as he realizes that he can't move. The shadows that cover the walls have come alive, writhing and twisting like a mass of dark, serpentine shapes. They slither across the floor, wrapping around his limbs, tightening their grip with each passing second. Ethan struggles, but the more he fights, the stronger the shadows become, as if feeding on his fear. The dark figure appears in the doorway, watching silently as the shadows consume him. Its presence fills the room with an overwhelming sense of dread, and Ethan feels his sanity slipping away, piece by piece. The whispers are louder than ever, filling his ears with the deafening roar of malevolent voices that drown out all reason. "It's time!" they scream. "There is no escape!" Ethan's vision blurs as the shadows pull him deeper into the darkness, the last remnants of his will crumbling under the relentless assault. In a final desperate act, Ethan manages to break free from the shadow's grip, stumbling blindly through the shifting maze of the house. Every door he opens leads to another room of horrors, rooms filled with the distorted faces of those who have come before him, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths twisted in eternal screams. The walls are lined with mirrors that reflect not his own image, but the dark figure standing behind him, its shadow stretching impossibly long, reaching out to consume him. The figure's hand is always just inches away, yet it never touches him, prolonging the agony, keeping him trapped in a state of perpetual fear. Ethan's mind begins to fracture under the relentless pressure. He hears his own voice, screaming in the distance, but he can't tell if it's coming from his throat or from somewhere deep within the house. He can feel the walls closing in on him, pressing against his skin, the very fabric of the house tightening around him like a noose. The air is thick with the smell of decay and something far worse, something that reeks of ancient, unspeakable evil. Finally, Ethan stumbles into the basement, the place he has feared most. The air is icy, colder than death, and the darkness is so complete that it feels like a physical presence, pressing in on him from all sides. The whispers here are deafening, a cacophony of voices that blend together into a maddening chorus. In the center of the basement stands the dark figure, shrouded in shadows, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Ethan knows that this is the heart of the house's power, the source of the terror that has consumed him. As he approaches the figure, he feels an overwhelming sense of inevitability, as if every step he has taken since entering the house has led to this moment. The figure extends a hand, and Ethan sees that it holds the same photograph he found earlier, the one of him sleeping, with the figure standing at the edge of his bed. But this time, there is something new in the image. His face is twisted in a look of pure, unadulterated terror, and the figure is no longer at the edge of the bed. It's standing right behind him, its hand resting on his shoulder, as if claiming him as its own. Ethan tries to scream, but no sound comes out. The darkness closes in, and the figure moves closer, its form shifting and distorting as it reaches out to him. The last thing Ethan sees before the darkness consumes him completely is the figure's face, a grotesque, twisted parody of his own, with hollow, lifeless eyes that reflect his deepest fears. And then, there is nothing but silence and darkness, as Ethan's mind shatters under the weight of the terror that has finally claimed him. Ethan wakes in the cold, damp basement, his body aching from the fall. His head throbs with a dull, relentless pain, and his vision is blurred, as though a thick fog has settled over his eyes. The air is heavy with the stench of mildew and rot, and the darkness presses in around him, suffocating in its intensity. For a moment, he can't remember where he is or how he got here. But then the memories flood back. Memories of the shadows, the whispers, and the dark figure that has haunted his every step. His heart pounds in his chest as the realization hits him. He is trapped, deeper than ever in the house's malevolent grasp. Desperate to escape, Ethan stumbles to his feet, his legs shaking beneath him. The basement is a labyrinth of narrow corridors and low-hanging beams, with walls that seem to ooze darkness. Every corner he turns reveals more of the house's secrets. Ancient, rusted tools stained with what looks like dried blood, old photographs of people whose faces are twisted in agony, and strange symbols carved into the stone walls, symbols that seem to pulse with a sinister energy. The whispers are louder down here, more insistent, urging him to give in, to let go. "There is no way out," they hiss. "You belong to us now." Ethan's panic grows as he navigates the maze-like basement, each step taking him deeper into the heart of the house's terror. He finds more notes, similar to the ones he found before, but these are different, less like warnings and more like taunts. "You're getting closer," one reads, scrawled in the same eerie handwriting. "But do you really want to know?" Another, pinned to the wall with a rusty nail, simply says, "The truth will destroy you." The words fill him with a sense of dread that tightens like a vice around his chest. What truth is the house hiding? And does he even want to uncover it? In his frantic search for answers, Ethan discovers a small, hidden room at the end of a long, narrow corridor. The door creaks open to reveal a dimly lit chamber, its walls lined with shelves filled with dusty, decaying books and strange, ancient artifacts. In the center of the room stands a large wooden table, and on it, an open book, its pages yellowed with age. The air in the room is colder than the rest of the basement, and as Ethan steps inside, he feels a chill run down his spine, as though he is being watched by unseen eyes. The book on the table seems to beckon him, and despite the fear gnawing at his insides, Ethan approaches it. The pages are filled with writings in a language he doesn't understand, a script that seems to writhe and shift on the page, making his head spin, but it's the illustrations that truly horrify him. Gruesome, detailed drawings of rituals, sacrifices, and dark ceremonies, all centered around the same symbol he has seen carved into the walls of the basement. The images depict twisted figures, their faces contorted in pain, performing unspeakable acts in the name of something ancient and evil. At the bottom of the page, Ethan finds a single ominous phrase written in English. "To know the truth is to invite madness." His breath catches in his throat as the meaning of the words sinks in. The house isn't just haunted, it's cursed, a place where reality is twisted and the line between the living and the dead is blurred. Whatever force resides here, it's been feeding on the fear and suffering of those who dared to seek the truth. And now it has set its sights on him. The whispers in the room grow louder, more frantic, as if the house knows that Ethan is close to uncovering its darkest secret. He flips through the pages of the book, his hands trembling, until he finds a section that seems to be a history of the house. The text is cryptic, filled with references to ancient rituals and dark pacts made with entities from beyond the veil of reality. It speaks of a cult that once used the house as a temple, performing rites to summon and bind a powerful, malevolent spirit. The final passage, barely legible, reads, "The spirit is bound to the house, its hunger unending. It will consume all who enter until its master returns to set it free." Ethan feels a wave of nausea as the implications of the text hit him. The house isn't just haunted, it's a prison, a vessel for something far more terrifying than any ghost. And now that something is trying to break free, using him as a pawn in its deadly game. The enigma that has haunted him since he first set foot in the house is almost within his grasp, but he knows that solving it could mean the end of his sanity, or worse, his life. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Ethan begins to piece together the clues, his mind racing to connect the dots. The notes, the whispers, the dark figure, all of them are part of the house's twisted game, leading him to this moment. But the more he uncovers, the more the house resists, warping reality around him in a last-ditch effort to protect its secret. The walls close in, the shadows grow darker, and the whispers become a deafening roar in his mind, threatening to drown out all reason. In the final moments of clarity, Ethan realizes that the house has been manipulating him from the start, guiding him to this point where he must make a choice: uncover the truth and face the madness that comes with it, or turn away and live with the terror gnawing at his soul, knowing that he will never truly escape. The unbearable weight of the decision presses down on him as the house's malevolent presence looms ever closer, ready to consume him whole. With a trembling hand, Ethan reaches for the final page of the book, the last piece of the puzzle that holds the key to the house's curse. But as he reads the words scrawled there, a scream of pure horror escapes his lips. The truth is more terrible than he could have imagined, a revelation so dark and twisted that it shatters the last vestiges of his sanity. The words on the page twist and writhe, forming shapes that burn into his mind, branding him with the knowledge that can never be forgotten. The book falls from his hands as the reality around him begins to warp and distort. The walls of the room seem to melt away, revealing an endless void of darkness, filled with the faces of those who came before him, each one twisted in agony, their eyes wide with the same terror that now grips his soul. The dark figure steps forward, no longer a shadow, but a fully formed entity, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. It reaches out to Ethan, its hand cold and clammy as it grips his shoulder. The whispers in his mind are no longer a cacophony, but a single, clear voice, speaking the truth that he has uncovered. "You are the key," it says, "the one who will set me free." Ethan's mind fractures under the weight of the knowledge, and he realizes with dawning horror that he has been led here, not to uncover the truth, but to become a part of it. The house, the spirit, the dark figure, they are all one, and now they have claimed him as their own. As the darkness closes in, Ethan's last coherent thought is a plea for mercy, but he knows it is too late. The truth has destroyed him, just as the house intended. His scream echoes through the void, a final desperate cry that fades into the endless night, as the house consumes him, body and soul, adding him to its collection of lost, tortured souls. The enigma has been solved, but the price is more than Ethan could ever have imagined. The house stands silent, victorious, as the last remnants of his sanity slip away into the abyss, leaving nothing but darkness and despair. Ethan's mind is unraveling, fraying at the edges as the weight of the truth bears down on him. The house, once a mere structure of wood and stone, now pulses with a malevolent life, its very walls seeming to close in on him as if to swallow him whole. The air is thick with the scent of decay and something far worse, something ancient and unspeakable that seeps into his lungs with every breath, choking him with dread. The whispers have coalesced into a single voice, cold, mocking, and omnipresent, echoing through his thoughts and driving him to the brink of madness. "You have come so far," it taunts. But now it's time to face the truth. Ethan's vision blurs as he stumbles through the darkened corridors of the house, his body weak and trembling, his mind a chaotic whirl of fear and confusion. Every door he opens reveals scenes of horror, rooms filled with grotesque, twisted figures frozen in eternal agony, their faces contorted in silent screams. The walls themselves seem to breathe, expanding and contracting as if the house is a living, hungry entity, feeding off his terror. The reality he once knew has disintegrated into a nightmare from which there is no escape. He reaches the basement once more, drawn by a force he can't resist. The stairs creak under his weight, each step taking him closer to the darkness that waits below. The air grows colder with each passing moment, until it feels like he is descending into the very heart of an icy void. The whispers return, now a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, their words incomprehensible but filled with malice. He can feel their hatred, their desire to consume him, to drag him down into the abyss where countless others have been lost before him. At the bottom of the stairs, the door to the basement looms before him, an imposing black monolith that seems to absorb all light. Ethan's hand trembles as he reaches for the doorknob, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath coming in shallow, rag gasps. He knows that beyond this door lies the truth he has been seeking, the dark secret that the house has guarded for so long. But he also knows that to uncover it is to invite a fate worse than death. With a final, desperate surge of will, Ethan pushes the door open and steps into the basement. The darkness is absolute, a void that swallows everything. But in the center of the room, a single light flickers weakly, illuminating a figure that sends a jolt of pure terror through his soul. The dark figure, the shadow that has haunted him from the beginning, stands before him in all its terrible glory. No longer just a vague, threatening presence, it is now fully realized. A tall, emaciated form cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with an unnatural, malevolent light. Ethan's knees buckle as the figure turns its gaze upon him, its eyes boring into his very soul. The whispers fall silent, replaced by a deep, resonant voice that seems to come from all around him, filling the room with its power. "You have come to the end," the voice intones, "and now you will face the truth." The figure steps forward, and Ethan can feel the temperature drop even further, the cold seeping into his bones, freezing him in place. As the figure approaches, the light in the room intensifies, revealing the true horror of what lies within. The walls are lined with faces, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, frozen in expressions of terror and despair. They are the faces of those who came before him, those who sought the truth and paid the ultimate price. Their eyes, though lifelesser, seem to follow him as he moves, pleading silently for release, for an end to their eternal torment. The dark figure reaches out a skeletal hand, its fingers long and thin, like the claws of a predator. Ethan feels a cold, clammy grip on his shoulder as the figure touches him, and a wave of despair washes over him, so intense that it nearly drives him to his knees. The voice returns, more powerful now, reverberating through the very core of his being. "You are the last," it says, "the final piece of the puzzle. With you, the house will be whole again, and I will be free." Ethan's mind reels as the truth finally dawns on him. The house, the figure, the whispers, they are all one, a single entity bound by a curse as old as time itself. The house is not just haunted, it is alive, a prison for a malevolent spirit that is fed on the souls of those who entered, using their fear and suffering to sustain itself. And now, with Ethan, it has found the key to breaking free from its earthly bonds. The figure's grip tightens, and Ethan feels his strength draining away, his life force being siphoned off into the dark void that surrounds him. He tries to resist, to pull away, but it's no use. The house's power is too great, its hold on him too strong. The faces on the walls seem to close in on him, their mouths opening in silent screams as they watch him fall. The light in the room flickers, then dies, plunging him into total darkness. But even in the darkness, Ethan can see the figure's eyes, glowing with a terrible light, growing larger and more intense as it consumes him. The voice, now a deafening roar, fills his mind with the truth he has sought for so long. "You are mine," it says, "and with you I am free." In a final desperate act, Ethan reaches deep within himself, summoning the last reserves of his will. He knows that he cannot defeat the house, cannot destroy the entity that has claimed him, but he can deny it what it wants most: freedom. With a cry of defiance, he pulls away from the figure's grip, breaking free of its hold for just a moment. The light returns, bright and blinding, and the faces on the wall scream in unison, a chorus of agony that shakes the very foundations of the house. The dark figure recoils, its eyes narrowing in fury. It lunges at Ethan, but he is ready this time. In his hand, he holds the book he found earlier, the ancient tome that holds the key to the house's curse. With a final, desperate act, he opens the book to the last page, the one that contains the ritual to banish the spirit back to the void from which it came. The words are in a language he doesn't understand, but they flow from his lips as if he has always known them, the syllables twisting and turning in the air like living things. The figure screams, a sound of pure rage and terror as the light in the room intensifies, filling every corner with its blinding radiance. The walls begin to shake, the faces contorting in agony as the house itself rebels against the ritual. But Ethan doesn't stop. He can't stop. The words continue to pour from his mouth, faster and faster, until they become a torrent of sound, drowning out the figure's screams and the whispers that have plagued him for so long. With a final shuddering gasp, the figure collapses, its form disintegrating into a cloud of dark, swirling smoke. The light explodes outward, filling the entire house with a blinding, purifying glow. The walls buckle and crack, the floors shatter, and the ceiling caves in, as the house is consumed by the light, its dark power finally broken. Ethan falls to the ground, exhausted, his body trembling with the effort. The light fades, and the house around him crumbles into ruin. The curse that held it together, finally lifted. He can hear the voices of the trapped souls, no longer screaming, but sighing in relief as they are released from their torment. The darkness that once filled the house is gone, replaced by the soft, pale light of dawn streaming through the broken windows. Ethan lies there, unable to move as the last remnants of the house collapse around him. He knows that he has won, but the victory feels hollow, the cost too great. The truth he sought has destroyed him, leaving him broken and empty, a shell of the man he once was. But as the morning light washes over him, he feels a sense of peace, knowing that he has done what so many before him could not. He has faced the darkness, and he has survived. The house is gone, reduced to rubble, but the memory of what happened there will stay with Ethan forever. He knows that he will never truly escape the horrors he witnessed, that the darkness will always be a part of him. But for now, at least, he is free, and that is enough. As he closes his eyes, the whispers return, softer now, almost comforting, as they lull him into a deep, dreamless sleep. Ethan awakens to a desolate silence. The once grand, oppressive house that had loomed over him for what felt like an eternity now lies in ruins around him, reduced to a pile of rubble and dust. The morning light filters through the debris, casting long shadows that stretch across the ground. But the warmth of the sun does little to chase away the chill that has settled deep in his bones. He is alive, but the victory feels hollow. The triumph tainted by the horrors he has endured and the truths he has uncovered. The air is thick with the scent of earth and decay, and as Ethan pushes himself up from the ground, he is met with a landscape that is both familiar and alien. The house, now nothing more than a crumbling ruin, seems to have taken a piece of him with it. The memories of what he faced within those walls, the dark figure, the whispers, the unbearable terror, are seared into his mind, a permanent scar that will never fade. Ethan stumbles through the debris, his body weak and trembling. Every step feels like an enormous effort, as if the weight of the house's curse still clings to him, dragging him down. The landscape around him is eerily silent, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The birds, the insects, even the wind, everything is still, unnaturally so, and the absence of sound only serves to heighten the sense of dread that lingers in the air. As he navigates through the ruins, Ethan's mind races with questions. What happened to the dark figure? Is the spirit truly gone, or has it merely retreated, waiting for its next opportunity to strike? The whispers that had plagued him for so long are gone, but in their place, a deep, unsettling quiet has taken hold. It is as if the house, even in its destruction, still holds some dark power, some lingering malevolence that refuses to let him go. Ethan's thoughts are interrupted by a sudden, sharp pain in his chest. He doubles over, clutching at his heart, as a wave of terror washes over him. The ground beneath his feet seems to shift, and for a moment, he feels as though he is standing on the edge of a vast, bottomless abyss, staring down into the void. The sensation is overwhelming, a dizzying mix of fear and vertigo that threatens to pull him under. But just as quickly as it came, the feeling passes, leaving him shaken and gasping for breath. It is then that Ethan notices something strange in the rubble. A glint of light, barely visible among the debris. He hesitates, a deep sense of foreboding settling over him. But something compels him to investigate. He digs through the rubble with trembling hands, his fingers raw and bleeding, until he uncovers a small, polished stone, smooth to the touch and unnaturally cold. The stone is etched with the same symbols he saw in the book, the symbols of the ancient ritual that bound the spirit to the house. As he holds the stone in his hand, a terrible realization dawns on him. The spirit is not gone. It has not been destroyed, only contained, trapped within this small, innocuous-looking object. The house may be gone, but its dark heart still beats, and Ethan, by some cruel twist of fate, has become its new guardian. The stone pulses with a faint, malevolent energy, and Ethan can feel the darkness within it, whispering to him, calling out to be released. Panic sets in as Ethan tries to rid himself of the stone, throwing it as far as he can into the ruins. But no matter how many times he throws it away, it always finds its way back to him, appearing in his pocket, in his hand, as if it is bound to him by some unbreakable force. The whispers return, soft at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. "You cannot escape," they say. "You are ours now." Desperation drives Ethan to flee, but no matter how far he runs, the whispers follow, echoing in his mind, growing more insistent, more demanding. He tries to leave the ruins behind, to return to the life he once knew, but he finds himself drawn back to the site of the house, again and again, as if the stone is pulling him toward it, refusing to let him go. The weight of the stone in his pocket becomes unbearable, a constant reminder of the darkness that now resides within him. The days turn into weeks, and Ethan's sanity begins to fray. He can no longer distinguish between reality and the horrors that plague his mind. The faces of the lost souls he saw in the house appear to him in his dreams, their eyes filled with the same terror he now feels. They speak to him in the darkness, begging for release, for an end to their suffering. But Ethan knows that there is nothing he can do. He is trapped, just as they were, a pawn in the spirit's eternal game. Ethan's world shrinks to the size of the ruins, the only place where he feels any sense of familiarity, any connection to reality. But even here, the darkness encroaches, seeping into every corner of his mind. The stone grows colder with each passing day, its whispers more insistent, more commanding. It speaks of power, of the ability to control the darkness, to harness it for his own purposes. But Ethan knows that this is a lie, a trap designed to ensnare him, to make him the spirit's willing servant. In his final moments of clarity, Ethan makes a decision. He cannot destroy the stone, but he can keep it from ever being found. He returns to the ruins of the house, now overgrown with weeds and vines, the site of so much horror and despair. He digs a deep hole in the earth, his hands raw and bleeding, and buries the stone as deep as he can, covering it with dirt and rubble, hoping that the earth will hold it, contain it, keep it from ever being uncovered. But as he finishes his task, Ethan knows that it is only a temporary solution. The spirit is patient, and it will wait for as long as it takes to find another way to escape, another soul to corrupt. And Ethan, now forever bound to the stone, to the house, and to the darkness, will never truly be free. The whispers may be quiet for now, but he knows they will return, louder and more insistent, until they drive him to the brink of madness once again. As the last rays of the sun disappear behind the horizon, Ethan stands at the edge of the ruins, staring down at the place where he buried the stone. The darkness around him seems to pulse with a life of its own, and he feels the weight of the spirit's gaze upon him, watching, waiting. He turns to leave, but the ground beneath his feet shifts once more, and he stumbles, falling to his knees. The whispers return, louder than ever, filling his mind with a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, all demanding his attention. "You cannot escape," they scream. "You are ours." The weight of the darkness is too much to bear, and Ethan collapses to the ground, his body racked with terror, his mind unraveling under the strain. In his final moments, Ethan understands the true horror of his situation. The spirit has not been defeated, only delayed. and it will continue to haunt him, to torment him, until it finally breaks free. And when it does, it will be stronger, more powerful, and more malevolent than ever before. The house may be gone, but the darkness remains, an eternal curse that will never be lifted. Ethan's last thought, before the darkness consumes him completely, is of the faces he saw in the house, the souls trapped in eternal torment. He knows now that he will join them, that he is destined to become one of them, a lost soul forever bound to the Spirit's will. And as the whispers finally silence, as the world fades to black, Ethan is left with the knowledge that he is no longer himself, but something else entirely, an instrument of the darkness, a vessel for the Spirit's power. The ruins of the house stand silent and empty, the stone buried deep beneath the earth, waiting for the day when it will be uncovered, and the cycle will begin anew. And in the stillness, in the quiet of the night, the whispers start again, soft at first, but growing louder, calling out to the next soul who will venture too close, who will seek the truth, and who will, inevitably, be consumed by the abyss of horror that lies within. The ruins of the house stand like a scar on the landscape, a reminder of the horrors that transpired there. The once grand structure has crumbled into dust, leaving only the shattered remnants of walls and the twisted skeletons of beams reaching toward a sky that seems perpetually gray. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, as if the land itself mourns the loss of what once stood there. Yet, despite the destruction, an unsettling presence lingers, an invisible weight pressing down on anyone who dares to approach. Ethan is gone, his fate sealed by the darkness that claimed him, but the story does not end with his disappearance. The house, though reduced to rubble, has left behind something far more sinister, an atmosphere of dread that clings to the place, infecting the minds of those who draw near. It is said that the area is cursed, that those who come too close to the ruins are plagued by nightmares, whispers in the night, and a sense of being watched by unseen eyes. The locals avoid the place, passing on stories of the horrors that took place there, of the dark figure that was said to haunt the halls, and of the man who was never seen again. But for those who cannot resist the pull of the unknown, the ruins hold a terrible allure. Stories begin to circulate of strange occurrences. A group of teenagers who ventured into the ruins on a dare, only to flee in terror, claiming they saw shadows moving in the dark. A curious traveler who stopped to take a photograph, only to find that the images on his camera were distorted, showing faces in the rubble that weren't there. A local historian who, after researching the history of the house, was found wandering the streets in a daze, muttering about the whispers and the stone. The legend of the house grows, fueled by these encounters, and soon it becomes a place of dark pilgrimage for those who seek the thrill of the unknown. Ghost hunters, thrill seekers, and the morbidly curious make their way to the ruins, each hoping to catch a glimpse of the supernatural, to hear the whispers for themselves. But what they find is far more terrifying than they could have imagined. The first signs are subtle: a chill in the air, a rustling in the bushes, a feeling of being watched. Then, as night falls, the real horror begins. The shadows in the ruins seem to come alive, twisting and writhing as if possessed by some unseen force. The air grows thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint sound of whispers. Soft, insistent, and filled with a malevolent intent. Those who hear the whispers feel an overwhelming sense of dread, a compulsion to flee, but find themselves unable to move, as if the very ground beneath them is holding them in place. Some say they have seen the dark figure, standing at the edge of the ruins, watching with hollow eyes as they approach. Others speak of a deep, bottomless pit that opens up in the earth, filled with writhing shadows and the faces of the damned, their eyes pleading for release. But perhaps the most terrifying accounts come from those who claim to have found the stone, a small, cold object that seems to pulse with a life of its own. They speak of the stone's whispers, of how it calls to them, urging them to pick it up, to hold it close, and how, once they do, they are never the same again. The stories vary, but they all end the same way, with the realization that the house's curse is not bound to the ruins, but to something far more insidious. The darkness that once dwelled within the house has found a new way to spread, through the stone, through the whispers, through the very ground on which the house once stood, and now it seeks new victims, drawing them in with the promise of secrets and power, only to trap them in an endless cycle of fear and despair. The truth, it seems, will never be fully uncovered. The house, the dark figure, the stone, all are part of a mystery that refuses to be solved. A puzzle with pieces that don't quite fit, leaving those who seek the answers trapped in a web of confusion and terror. The more they dig, the deeper the darkness seeps into their minds, until they are left questioning their own sanity, unsure of what is real and what is imagined. In the end, the house may be gone, but its legacy lives on, a shadow that stretches across time, touching the lives of those who dare to challenge its secrets. The land is cursed, the stories say, and those who venture too close are doomed to suffer the same fate as Ethan, a fate sealed by the whispers that never truly leave, by the darkness that lies just beneath the surface, waiting for the next soul to ensnare. The final image is one of quiet, unsettling ambiguity. The camera pans across the desolate landscape, over the ruins of the house, to a solitary figure standing at the edge of the rubble. The figure is indistinct, shrouded in shadow, its features impossible to make out. It turns slowly, as if aware of the viewer's gaze, and begins to walk toward the horizon, disappearing into the mist. The whispers fade into the distance, but they never truly go silent, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease, a feeling that the terror is far from over. And then, just before the screen fades to black, a single whisper, barely audible, cuts through the silence. It's not over. It will never be over. The image of the stone flashes briefly on the screen, cold, smooth, and pulsing with a faint, malevolent glow, before disappearing into the darkness, leaving the audience with a final, chilling thought. The curse endures, and the horror will continue, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to fall into its grasp.